Hello and welcome to the first episode of Starside Chat in 2022. We're delayed a little bit, but we're excited to be back. Joining me, as always, is Aaron Capo.
Hello.
And I'm Zach Owens, the other host. And today we're doing our top 10 games of 2021. And it's pretty exciting. I would always look forward to doing these lists at the end of the year. But we do have some news first. Some sad news. It sounds like E3 is dead.
Yeah, the ESA, the people who run E3, are bad. It seems like they're not a good organization. So they came out earlier, like a week or 2 weeks ago, and they were like, because of COVID, we're going to probably cancel E3 again. But then there was some reporting that they had actually decided to do this a long time ago, and they were just kind of using COVID as an excuse. And so it's kind of all really up in the air. I mean, we really only have Jeff Keighley's Summer Games Fest, but unfortunately that's kind of more spread out across the entire summer.
It is, and I feel like last year there were some like random presentations that were done from like just different companies doing it on their own that were not necessarily tied to E3, so we might see stuff like that again. So there probably will be some sort of like E3 like thing that happens either in June or like, I mean, I'm sure it'll all be digital, but yeah, sort of an end of an era. No more E3.
It's a bummer. So maybe it will be reborn in some way. Maybe Jeff Keighley will buy the rights to E3 and just transform Summer Games Fest back into E3 under like his purview. Yeah. Wouldn't that be great? But for now, yeah, it seems like it's a no-go.
Yeah. Also, some recent news. Sounds like they're working on a new Mario Kart 9, and they say there's going to be a new twist.
Yeah, what do you think this is? I mean, previously, like one of the ways they tried to mix up the formula was that Double Dash, which I never played because I believe that was on Wii U, and I never had that.
It was on GameCube originally.
Oh, was it? Double
Yes,
Dash.
And I loved it. It was a lot of fun to play with my siblings growing up, and the speculation is maybe they're gonna have like some sort of Double Dash mode, or like it'll just be. But that wouldn't necessarily be a new twist, would it? It would be like an old twist. But
what if it's a combination? This is what I've been reading online, is people are speculating that they're going to smashify it.
Oh, where, yeah. I heard
different properties are going to all of a sudden be inside. You're going to have, you're going to be unlocking like Snake from Metal Gear Solid and stuff.
Yeah, like Master Chief is in there with driving a warthog. And
I would love. I mean, Smash Brothers Ultimate was such a success and had such a long tail because they had all these DLC packs of new people. I feel like they would be geniuses if they realized, like, oh, we can do the same thing with Mario Kart. Although,
would they still call it Mario Kart?
That's a good question, and I don't know how different each like cart could be, because the cool thing about Smash Brothers was like each character played so differently, especially like the Minecraft guy or whatever. But you can't really, I don't know how much variety, unless they're super changing up the formula and there are like crazy new mechanics. I don't know what extra characters would add besides just like, cosmetically, oh, my guy is the two ice climbers or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. I mean, Mario Kart 8 has sold so well on the Switch that seems like they've put off working on a new Mario Kart for a long time. So
yeah, they basically didn't need to, because 8 was on Wii U, right? It was just a port.
Yeah,
so
Mario Kart 8
been
Deluxe
Mario Kart.
Is just. I think that came out in like 2014, so it's been a long time since they made an actually new Mario Kart. So yeah, I don't know what to expect with it, but it's going to sell well. So it makes a lot of sense for them to make one.
We always say like, oh, I wonder if it will have a showing at E3, but we just said that E3 is not happening. But I wonder if when Nintendo does whatever their Nintendo Direct for the summer is, I wonder if we'll see a little bit of it.
Yeah, there's no real way of knowing how far out this game might be or like how much work they've put in on it, but yeah, I would definitely like to see like something about it at some sort of E3 or not E3, but Nintendo Direct at some point this year. But
this is the year of the Breath of the Wild 2 Direct. I'm gonna call it right now.
Calling it. Well, so does that guarantee that it'll come out this year?
I think it is gonna come out in either like September or November, December of this year.
I mean, I hope you're right. I don't know. I have concerns, but I am definitely hoping that it comes out this year. So next up, I thought this was interesting. We both like Stadia.
It's true.
And so it's a little bit old. There was a 9 to 5 Google article that talked about the Stadia Makers program and how that's still ongoing with multiple games in development. And a lot of people online were sort of doom and gloom about Stadia after Google announced the closure of its like in-house game development studio. But what they forgot was that Google still has the Stadia Makers program, which is kind of like, I think EA has something similar where they like fund indie games. I don't remember what theirs is called, but yeah, basically Google funds like indie games, like development of indie games through the Stadia Makers program. And so like recent games that sort of came out are games like Grime and The Dark Side Detective and 100 Days Foreclosed, Merrick's Market. They have other ones in the
What was that water one that you played?
Wavetail. I don't know if that was technically a Stadia Makers program. I know that was just a timed exclusive.
Oh, okay.
And that was the same for, what was that, Young Souls? I forget who developed that, but that game also came out as a timed exclusive for Stadia last year. But yeah, there was an interesting quote that 9 to 5 Google pulled from the developer of Grime and The Dark Side Detective. Grime was great, by the way. If you're looking for a game that's like a good sort of Metroidvania to jump into after you played Metroid Dread, definitely check out Grime. It's very, very good. But anyway, the quote from this developer was, let's see. After being accepted into the Makers program, we worked to launch 2 of our titles into Stadia Pro, Grime and The Dark Side Detective. Despite being polar opposites in terms of content and genre, both performed well, both in terms of finances and player reception. Stadia Pro seems to benefit a wide variety of titles regardless of style and replayability. And I remember there was a time last year where there was some news about how Google was sort of changing how they, I guess I don't know the wording for it, but how they sort of funded and rewarded developers through Stadia Pro, where it was more based on like playtime. So like I thought that would mean that it would benefit developers who make games that are like are really long, so like an Assassin's Creed type of a game, or like something that has a lot of replay value, like a Destiny 2 or something like that, where you're just sort of constantly coming back to put more and more time into, and that it would sort of mean that there would be less incentive for like smaller indie games that are like 5 to 8 hours or something like that to come to Stadia Pro. And so I was worried that we would see fewer of those games come to Stadia Pro, but they're saying no, that's not the case. That coming to Stadia Pro is actually both financially viable for them, but also they're getting a lot of like good reception from players and reviewers. So I think that's an encouraging sign. This is something, I think there was some speculation that maybe the Stadia Makers program was dead. Maybe it's just because Google hadn't been talking about it, but here's this 9 to 5 Google article coming along to say, no, it's not dead. It's actually still going. They still have more games in the works, and a developer anecdotally is saying this is a good thing that helped us out a lot. So that's
great.
That's pretty good. Next up, moving on, there's a bunch of Nintendo stuff that came out recently.
Yes.
Did you get a chance to watch this Kirby and the Forgotten Land gameplay trailer?
Yeah, they put this out of nowhere. They were just like, here's 3 minutes of Kirby footage, and it looks amazing. Like, it looks definitely...
Yeah. Super Mario Odyssey?
Yeah, it seems like Super Mario Odyssey. I originally was like, everybody was like, oh, this is kind of like Breath of the Wild Kirby. But it does seem level-based. I think you probably have a central town, and then you, like, venture out from that town and go to a specific area. But
yeah, it looks a lot like the way in Super Mario Odyssey where you would jump in that hat thing that you would fly around, and you would just go to a different area, and then you'd be able to play around there for a little while. Similarly, in this trailer, Kirby's seen riding on the star, which is, of course, very, true to Kirby games of the past. And he'll just go to a different area. And so it's, instead of being like just a big open world, sort of Breath of the Wild style, you do sort of have that overworld map that you're sort of going to different areas on.
It looks great, though. And they also, at the end of the trailer, they put the release date, and it's coming out super soon. It's March 25th, 2022.
Yeah, so not too close to the new Pokemon game coming out in January, but also coming a little sooner than maybe we thought it might. So that's
I thought
cool.
This wasn't going to be like summer or something. I didn't realize it was going to be in like less than 2 months.
Yeah. So pretty cool. Looking forward to that. Also glad it's not coming out in February, because everything's coming out in February.
But speaking of Breath of the Wild we were talking about, there was also like a 13-minute gameplay overview of Pokemon Legends how do you say it? Arceus?
Yeah.
That does seem more Breath of the Wild-ish, where you're like collecting materials. It seems like you have to craft your own Pokeballs, and
yeah, so they're going sort of back to the origins of Pokemon. So like you're sort of making the Pokedex, and you're, instead of like in Pokemon games of old, you would just go to a store and buy a bunch of like stuff. But obviously, if you're going back to the origins, like stores like that wouldn't have existed. So you're sort of crafting all of that stuff. So if you need like different items, you're gonna craft it by getting items throughout the world, I guess. And it was unclear to me. It seemed almost like it was a little bit more Monster Hunter like, where you sort of maybe have a little bit of like a hub area, and then you're sort of taking on missions and going out to different areas.
That's what it seemed like to me as well. Like you have your town, but then you have the entire world map that you can see, and then you take your rideable Pokemon to specific locations to look for those noble Pokemon, which are like glowing, and you have to just like throw balm at them until they let you capture them.
Yeah, and it seemed kind of cool because you can just like sneak around, and then like if you catch a Pokemon unaware, you can just throw a Pokeball at it and catch it. But if they notice you, then that's not going to work, because their defenses would be up, and so you would have to actually do sort of old school like Pokemon battle type of thing to take their health down before you can catch them.
Well, and also there are quests, which is something I didn't realize was going to be a thing. Like, you just come upon people and they're like, hey, what did this one Pokemon's ears look like? Can you like go find me one? And so you just like, you have like a quest log, which I don't think is a thing usually from Pokemon games, where you can just like go into a town, collect a bunch of things you need to do, and then go out and do those things, and then you get rewards for them, which I think is interesting. It's a mix-up from the usual Pokemon. I mean, this whole game is a real about-face as far as like Pokemon narratives, but it's very interesting.
In the past, like in previous games, you could like go to somebody, like you would talk to somebody in like a town, and they would be like, I would like to trade this for this type of Pokemon. And if you happen to have it, then you could just do it. Or if you went out and got one, you could remember that and then go back to that town and trade it. But there were not like quests. There was not like a quest log or something like that. So I'm curious to see sort of how some of that works. But I don't know. I think it looks pretty good.
Are you going to get it?
I think I will. This is coming out in like a week or two. Like, it's not very far away. So, but yeah, I think it looks far more interesting to me than like if they were just to bring out like a normal mainline Pokemon game at this point. But I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. I'm like a lot of people are still sort of concerned about it and how well it's going to run on the Switch and all of that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it looks like a good. I think they're trying to find a middle ground where it's like this is still going to appeal to people who love like the classic mainline Pokemon games, but it's also like sort of going into new territory and doing things different, and maybe it's sort of like a baby step, but we'll
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Like Sword and Shield was another kind of baby step with that wild area,
Yeah.
and this is another like baby step, and then they're not really taking a lot of chances. I feel like I think you're right. They're still trying to appeal to mainline Pokemon audiences, but they're slowly getting to something that everybody has always wanted, which is like the open world Breath of the Wild style Pokemon game that you always see like, you know, those like Unreal Engine fan games where you're just like running around with a Pikachu and in real time having like what's that kind of combat called?
Turn-based.
Non-turn-based combat, which this is still turn-based.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm curious to see how different it is. But yeah, it could be one of those things where it's a little bit like I forget which podcast I was listening to, but they likened it to something like Persona 5 or not Persona 5, but like Persona, that series being sort of a branching out from Shin Megami Tensei, and like where they kind of live side by side and they're both successful and they're basically the same thing, but they're also not the same thing. You know what I mean? Like one sort of is a spinoff from the other, but they are both successful enough that they can live alongside each other. So they're curious to see if maybe that's how something like a Pokemon Legends series might go. I'm not sure, but another thing I wanted to quick mention was this weekend, if you do have Switch Online, you can play Captain Toad Treasure Tracker for free. I forget how long. Let me check.
It's a great game. I have that. I purchased it when it was on sale, and I love it. It's surprisingly long. I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, I was gonna say last year when they brought out Super Mario 3D World, in that game there are some like Captain Toad Treasure Tracker like levels that you can play, and I think wasn't Toad Treasure Tracker just a spinoff from that game? It's just like a full-on thing.
Yeah.
So I would play those and I'd be like, yeah, this is really fun. I would play like a full game of this, and so I did kind of want to pick up the game, but I had held off because there were so many other things to play. But now you can play it for free. It's from the 13th to the 20th of this month, so got a good amount of time to play this game. I think
it's great.
will.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I think I will try to jump in and play some. Looking forward to that. What's this Starfield watch we got going on?
So the people that made the toy makers that made the Pip-Boy that came with Fallout 4 have released a Starfield watch that is going to be probably in the collector's edition of Starfield when it comes out in November of this year, supposedly. And I guess we've seen this watch in the background a little bit. We saw the case that it comes in the very first Starfield trailer. Not the very first one, I guess, because that was just like a picture of space. But and I guess there was a behind the scenes. They're doing these like devlog things where they're talking about the making of Starfield, and in one of them, there's like a very quick shot of the case for this watch, and then they open it and you see the watch for a second. But the like nitty gritty of this watch was released. So we know like what all the buttons do, what all the soft menus are and things like that. It seems pretty cool. It has like the ability to get weather information, so you like can look up like the barometric pressure and stuff. But I don't know. I was not expecting to be super interested in a watch, but I was enthralled. I watched like a 10-minute video about all the features about this watch. We haven't even seen really gameplay footage of this game yet, but it's pretty interesting. I'm pretty excited for this game. How are you? What are your levels of excitement for this game?
Yeah, I'm also very excited about this game. It's definitely one of my most anticipated games of this year. It's I'm still crossing my fingers that it's actually gonna come out on the date that they said it will come out,
Yeah.
and that it won't get pushed back again. But yeah, I think it would be awesome if this came as part of the collector's edition. Like, I would maybe try to get it.
Yeah, I've been in the market for a smartwatch. I was holding off because rumor is they're going to release some sort of Pixel Watch at
Yeah.
Google I/O, which I'm interested in. But I gotta say I'm interested in this watch.
Yeah, I was gonna say I already have a smartwatch, so I don't necessarily need this, but this definitely seems like one of the more useful items that you could get from a collector's edition. Like, Bethesda always kind of goes all out and has this crazy big like collector's edition. Like, one time they released like a whatchamacallit, like a helmet from Fallout, power armor. And then
Oh yeah,
they had like the Pit Boy that you talked about. And so they always do these big like collector's editions where they give you like some sort of cool item from within the world, which makes me wonder if this watch is going to play some sort of role in the game or something similar to it.
it seems like it. The video I watched said there was like what I don't know where he pulled this from, but he was like, yeah, this screenshot shows that there's a very similar watch in the game, and it doesn't have like your steps or whatever. It actually has like, O2 level and other things like that. So it's possible that like it'll be a similar thing to Fallout, where your like menus are in game, you looking at a watch or something. But I don't know. I am pretty excited, I have to say. I also, the guy that I was watching the video on said he like, oh, this will all be revealed in the June reveal trailer. I don't know where he's getting that information from, but it would be great if in June there was just a ton of content drops about this and we finally get like gameplay and they do the whole walkthrough.
Yeah, I would love it if they would do like the old Bethesda style, like deep dive
They have
preview
to.
of the game before it launches and like over the summer. So that would be awesome.
But something to keep on the radar. But should we get to the main event?
We absolutely should. Why don't we start off with your number 10?
My number 10, let me get these pulled up. So that I played less games than you. We were talking about this off air, but you said you were able to come up with like a top 25 list.
Yeah.
And I really struggled to come up with a top 10. So I included some things that
Let's just say, like, before we even start, it was definitely a difficult year to, like, come up with, like, any sort of ranking, because there was not, like, a clear number one, I don't think, for either of us. And there was just, like, a lot of games that would have filled, like, a good, like, 3 through 7, you know what I mean? Like, in a normal year where there's, like, 2 really great games sort of vying for that number one spot. And then you have like a bunch of really good games that are not like clear number one games of the year. There was a bunch of games in that range for me this year. So it was kind of hard to figure out some sort of ranking for them.
So my number 10 is a thing that started happening last year, but I didn't really get into it until December. It's a website. It's that Wordle game everybody's playing.
Oh, yeah.
I have been not logging in because it's just a website, but I've been playing it every day for like 30 days. And it's a fun it reminds me of, I think we already talked about this just over text, but it reminds me of that HQ trivia kind of, where just that it is like once a day, every day, and everyone gets the same puzzle kind of a thing. So it's like a shared, and everyone like, shares their results. It gives you that cool little printout when you complete it. You can post it on Twitter and whatnot. A lot of people I follow on Twitter play it every day.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of people share that.
It's just a fun little thing. I wish it was more of an app. Like, I kind of hate that I have to like Google Wordle every day and click into it and then just go to it. But that's fine. And I guess there was some sort of controversy where a bunch of people tried to like steal the idea of Wordle and monetize it, and Apple was just like, stop doing this, and like took down all their games. Stuff where it was like, hey, you can play this Wordle that has the exact same, but you can play it like 4 times a day if you pay like $5 a day or something. with a bunch of microtransactions. But
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be like Flappy Bird, where they start like
exactly.
you just start seeing a bunch of different apps pop up in the App Store that are just very similar.
But this is great. It's something it's like kind of I get to work and I just like pull it up and I either will bang it out in like a half hour or I'll just, look at it every once in a while. I've yet to completely fail a day, which is exciting, but I have had a lot of them where you get 6 tries for the word. And I have had like 4 or 5 of them that I am on my 6th try and I just sort of guess and I get it and I maybe shouldn't have gotten it, but
yeah,
that's my number 10.
I've failed a couple of times. They got me with like a V. Like I never think to try V.
They get you with those double letters too.
Yeah.
Where you're like, well, an E isn't in this because it's already here, and in fact there are 2 E's.
Yeah, yeah. I think that might have gotten me once too, where I didn't think to try like a vowel twice, but yeah, it's fun. I agree with you. It's a fun game that's sort of having a nice little moment on the internet. So,
what's your number 10?
My number 10 is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart.
Oh, I forgot you have a PS5.
I do have a PS5. So this game was a lot of fun. It was a great little showcase for the DualSense controller as well. But it's basically like if Pixar made a Marvel movie where it's sort of superhero-like, but like it really is one of those things where, you know how Marvel does a really good job of like balancing like humor and character moments, but also these like big action set pieces. Like they really nailed it on that front, where they did a great job of sort of balancing all of that. So you do have your like smaller character moments, but you also have like a lot of humor mixed in, and you have those big action set pieces that are a lot of fun. And there's so many different weapons in the game to get and unlock, and each of them you can level them up, and they all have these different styles of shooting. Like some of them are like more normal guns, and some of them are like just these weird bonkers ideas of like, I think one of them you shoot out and it like turns everything into like grass or something like that. It's like really weird. And you don't have enough ammo for any one particular weapon that you can use that as like a primary and just never swap. So you do find yourself having to swap around a lot. But you have so many different weapons that you're never going to also like run out of ammo to the point where you're like, well, now I have nothing to use. But yeah, and it feels like the gameplay is also like constantly changing up. So you're going to these different areas and it's like giving you different abilities as well. And like the movement and platforming also becomes very fun. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was one of those games that didn't necessarily stick with me in a huge way, where I was like, oh yeah, this is like a really high up there for me, because I had never played like a Ratchet and Clank game before. But also like when I'm looking back on the games I played this year, like just like start to finish, mechanically, like this is definitely one of the best games that was probably made last year. So
yeah, we didn't talk about it, but AGDQ is happening right now, and I have not watched a lot of it live. I've sort of been bookmarking or like saving runs that I want to watch like at my leisure, but I did catch part of the Ratchet and Clank run live, and that game, it's just like it's a visual masterpiece to watch.
Yeah.
I was like watching during one of the first big set piece moments, and it's just like an insane thing to see happening in real time.
Yeah, it's a very, very beautiful game graphically. Like it's very, very impressive. And yeah, I don't know. I had a lot of fun with it. It was one of those games that once I started it, I didn't want to stop playing it. So yeah, I'll give it credit for that. It's my number 10. What is your number 9?
My number 9 is a game I did not complete, but I put it on here anyway because it did impact me. Eastward is a game that I played this year. Eastward has a very solid first, like, I want to say like 3 to 4 hours. And I was enraptured in like the first 3 or 4 hours. It was great. Like the music, the aesthetic, the combat was fun. But then it did not really evolve for me. Like, the story is interesting, but the combat never really gets. You get different weapons, but I was looking for something where you get different moves as well, and it really is just like hitting people with a frying pan over and over again. My biggest complaint with that game was it was just like way too wordy. Like every single dialogue, I forget. I was reading some review of it, and it was like Eastward uses like 2 sentences when one would do, and 1 sentence when none would do. And it's very true. Like, it really is just like there are times when you're playing that game and you're just like clicking through dialogue for like, it feels like 20 minutes. And what really broke the camel's back for me is the last world you get to, or like the final town you get to, I should say, is like, I guess spoilers for Eastward, but not really. The last town you get to is kind of like a Groundhog's Day town. And so it just compounded that because I had to watch the same dialogue over and over again, and you can't skip it. You have to do the same day over and over again, like 10 times.
Oh, man.
Not 10 times probably because I stopped, but I was just like, I can't deal with this right now. And then my one friend who was also playing it alongside me was like, yeah, the dialogue's pretty rough, but also the final like boss rush, because I guess they're after you get through the Groundhog's Day part, you just have to fight like back to back bosses, and it's just like very difficult. And that was something else I kind of didn't like about it, was how hard it was. Like if you don't craft enough sandwiches or whatever from cooking stations, you can get trapped and almost soft lock yourself unless you're like really good at the game. You have to like, if you're in an area and you only have 2 hearts left, it's sometimes like that's it. Like you have to do a boss on 2 hearts, and if you don't do it, then tough luck. I hope you had like an auto save. But the first like 3 to 4 hours was super, super solid, and I wish it had continued to evolve and be interesting to me. But unfortunately, it kind of fell flat because of the immense amount of text I had to read and the difficulty, and also just like your second character has interesting powers, but they don't really do as much as you want them to do. Like you can basically just freeze people for a while, and that's somewhat useful, but I don't know. That's why it's my number 9.
Yeah, I like the art style and the music of it. I started it briefly like last year at one point and just kind of fell off of it because there's so many other games that I was trying to play as well. And it's one of those that I've considered like maybe I'll go back once I get my Steam Deck, but yeah, I don't know. It's the way you've talked about it has sort of put me off of wanting to go back and actually play it. But
it's a hard game to recommend because it is so difficult at times, and it's also just like at times it's almost a visual novel.
Yeah, a little bit tedious at points.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's your number 9?
My number 9 is Guardians of the Galaxy.
I was expecting this to pop up on your list.
Yeah, so I actually finished it last weekend, I want to say. It's one of my biggest surprises, I would say, because I had no expectations for it. It was one of those games that when I remember seeing trailers for it or seeing them talk about it at E3 last year, I was like, why are they spending so much time on this game that nobody's going to play?
Well, that was like Square Enix's whole thing.
Yeah.
They just showed
like a 20-minute
40 minutes of footage
thing.
of this.
Yeah. And then it came out and everybody was like, no, actually, this is pretty good. And so I was against my better judgment. Maybe I went ahead and picked it up and actually really enjoyed it. I thought, like, we talked about it briefly on, I think, our previous podcast, where I was basically saying, like, the next Mass Effect game needs to like look at how they handled like crew conversations and just like being on the ship as sort of the hub area between missions. Like they need to definitely take a close look at how they handled that in Guardians of the Galaxy, because you can basically hang out in the ship for like 20 minutes and not hear like a line of dialogue repeated, like the Guardians all just like walk around the ship and they're just like sitting on the couch and they're just sort of having these little conversations back and forth, and you can walk up to them and talk to them, and they don't do like the Mass Effect thing where there's like a little dialogue thing and you just sort of hit a button and you'll have a little conversation with them. And then you can also like find items out in the world. And if you go back and you look at that item in like their quarters or whatever, they will have like a deeper conversation with you. And that's where you get some of those like more character revealing conversations. So I thought they did a really good job with that. The combat is not the best out there. It's not like bad. It's just like nothing to write home about. It's just sort of passable. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of talking, and it never got tedious or boring or like repetitive or annoying. So I thought they did a great job with the writing. I thought they did a great job with the voice performances. Like, it was one of those things where I was not sure if I was going to like it, because I was like, well, these are not the MCU versions of the characters. And yet, like, that was a little bit awkward at first, but like once you sort of get through that initial thing where you're like, oh, this is a different version of these characters, like almost immediately I was like, okay, I prefer this version of the characters to the MCU version. And so it didn't bother me at all beyond that. And there were parts of the game where I was literally like laughing because
oh wow,
I thought they did such a great job with the writing, and like Drax was hilarious, and just sort of having that him being so literal versus like Star-Lord, who is, you know, kind of jokey and sarcastic, and just like the interaction between those two characters I thought was great. And you do get these little moments as you're like going from objective to objective where they'll start talking about something, and you sort of have the opportunity to either feed into, like, if they're complaining about something, you can kind of join them in that, or you can also be like sort of the stoic, you know, Paragon Commander Shepard version where you're like refocusing the team. And so you get to kind of play which version of Star-Lord you want to be. And I found that version of Star-Lord way more compelling than the Chris Pratt version, who's just like kind of a doofus a little bit.
It's true.
So yeah, I don't know. I definitely recommend Guardians of the Galaxy if you've not played it yet. It's not too long. I don't think it overstays its welcome. But yeah, it's a great game. So it's my number 9. What's your number 8?
Well, the base game came out a long, long time ago, but my number 8 is the Minecraft Caves and Cliffs update, which was released this year. Every year when they do the big content drop for Minecraft and the game changes, I tend to dive in at least for a couple weeks and create a new world and just like listen to a podcast while I'm checking it out. And this one was really great. The Caves and Cliffs update really, really affected world generation, and I was able to find, I didn't like look up check out this world seed, it's like really crazy. I just sort of generated 2 or 3 until I found one that was interesting, and then I just kind of played around in it, and there have been a ton of changes since I stopped playing last year. The new cave system is super, super cool, and I downloaded like a shader pack, so it has like interesting lighting and everything looks really nice. And Minecraft is just the game that keeps on giving. It's I almost was going to get people to play it with me, but then I was like, no, I just kind of want to do this solo and listen to a podcast. And it was great. I'm excited for the next update next year. I think it's called the Wild update or something like that, or the Deep Wild. That's going to be super interesting, but I always love to revisit this game. And this Caves and Cliffs update was a great one. I would say like the last 2 were just like okay. I didn't really care about what was the last one? I feel like it was like the ocean one, maybe? I don't remember. But this one is great. Or no, maybe the last one was the town one. But definitely, if you still have Minecraft, if you bought it like 10 years ago or whatever, it's a great time to dive back in, because world generation is insane now, and you can find some really, really interesting, cool stuff and just kind of explore without really a goal in mind.
Yeah, I've never played Minecraft, so I don't know.
We should do maybe like a video sometime where I do find a good world seed and we just like explore.
Yeah, I'd be into that.
What's your number 8?
My number 8 is Little Nightmares 2.
Ah, yes.
This was, I think, the first 2021 game I played last year.
Oh, wow.
It came in like, I want to say early February. It was a Stadia Pro game when it launched, so I probably would not have played it if it was not for Stadia Pro. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm not super into like creepy horror stuff, but like it's like a side-scrolling game that there's like some puzzle elements to it, and it's a very, I don't want to spoil anything because I do still want you to play this game, but it's really, really good. The vibe of the game is creepy, but it's not like super spooky horror type stuff, I wouldn't say. And where the game goes is just like, it's pretty mind-blowing a little bit, like especially later on in the game. And it's one of those games that you'll play and then you'll want to look up like a bunch of analysis videos on YouTube just to like see other players' takeaway of like what they thought happened and like how they thought the resolution to the game was. And so I definitely recommend it. It's not a super long game, so you can definitely get through it relatively quickly. I did not play the first Little Nightmares, but I think maybe just through watching some of the analysis videos of Little Nightmares 2, I got a little bit of the story of what happened in the first one. And I definitely recommend Little Nightmares 2. It's one of those games that's really, really unique and satisfying. It's kind of, I want to liken it a little bit to like Limbo and Inside, sort of side scrolling, a little bit puzzly, and like there's not really dialogue so much as there's just a lot of environmental storytelling. And so the fact that they're able to tell such an interesting, compelling little story with the world that they've designed is just like, it's one of the best designed games I've played in a long time. I think it's very, very clever with its environmental storytelling. So I highly recommend that.
It was on my list to play. I bought the first one on Switch because it was on sale. And the first one, I hit a wall, and it was just like too obtuse for me. Like I dropped into a room, and there were like a bunch of black snakes in that room. And I could not figure out how to get past it. I had to look up what to do. And I was just like, I don't know if I'm interested in this right now. But I've only heard good things about the second one. Do you think it's okay? So you didn't even play the first one. Do you think it's okay to just go right to the second one?
Yeah, I just jumped into the second one and didn't feel like I was necessarily missing anything. But I'm sure you could also just look up like a recap of the first game and then just jump into the second one. I've also heard that the first one's a little bit obtuse and not necessarily as good as the second one. So I would definitely say just jump into the second one. I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the second one might even be like a prequel to the first one.
I believe that is true, yes.
So if that's the case, like you might understand the second one a little bit more having played the first one before it, but you might be fine to just play the second one and then go back and play the first one if you really wanted to.
Maybe in 2022 I will.
Maybe.
My number 7 is something we don't have to talk about a lot because I'm anticipating it's maybe on your list as well. But I only played part of it. So we can have the main conversation if it is further down your list. But my number 7 is the Halo Infinite multiplayer side of things. I dove into this not as much as I thought I was going to, but I really, really enjoyed it, and it really made me nostalgic for the old days of like Halo 1 and 2 multiplayer. I had a lot of fun. Just like it's very refreshing to have this kind of multiplayer experience, and also for it to be 100% free. It really brought me back to the old days in high school when we would hook up two like first gen Xboxes and just like each be in a room and play 4v4 against each other. But Is this a game that's also on your list? But you also played the campaign, and I've not done that yet.
It is, spoilers a little bit, it is further up my list. Yeah, I really...
So we don't have to touch on it too much.
Yeah, we can talk a bit about the multiplayer, though. I really enjoyed the multiplayer as well. I put a good amount of time into it. I returned to it a little bit. Like, I played a little bit this last week, and I still enjoy it. I still think it's great. And as someone who was not ever really a Halo person before, like... I don't know. I really, really enjoyed it enough to not just put it on my top 10 list, but to like genuinely play a good amount of it. And so it did sort of make me more of a Halo person. I like the different abilities. I think a lot of my thoughts maybe are more related to the campaign, so maybe we'll save that a little bit. Yeah. But I think the multiplayer itself, if there was no campaign, still would have been worth having on like the top 10 because it's that good.
I agree.
So
yeah,
the fact that there's also like a campaign for it and it's good, but definitely puts it higher up on my list. But we'll get to that in a little bit.
What's your number 7?
My number 7 is one that might also be on your list. So maybe, I don't know how much of this conversation we want to have right now, but it's Bowser's Fury.
Yes, let's talk about it. I had Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury because I had never played 3D World before.
Yeah, I didn't either. I really enjoyed the 3D World stuff, but mainly I was thinking of it for Bowser's Fury because that's the stuff that really stuck with me. This was sort of early on, maybe this is too much of an anecdote, but like this, I feel like this came out in February or March. Like it was super early. It was early,
yeah.
And at the time... me and my family were planning like our summer vacation, so we were planning like a beach vacation basically. So I'm like, my brain was in like beach vacation mode, and so I was playing this game. And of course, in Bowser's Fury, you're riding around on Plessy across the water and like stopping off in these different islands. And so like when I was not planning my vacation, I was basically on vacation in Bowser's Fury, and of course. It sort of coincided with the opening of Super Nintendo World at Universal in Japan.
Yes, you're right.
And so I was like watching all these YouTube videos of these people going around Super Nintendo World, and it was making me want to play Mario stuff. And so I was playing Bowser's Fury, and so it was just this like never-ending loop of like it may be cold and horrible here in the Midwest, because it's like February and March, but like I was in full on vacation mode. And so like that time of the year, for whatever reason, like stuck with me in a big way. And I very often think back fondly to like my time with Bowser's Fury because of that. And I would normally not put on my list a game that is sort of a re-release from like a previous year, speaking to like the Super Mario 3D World stuff, but like the Bowser's Fury, even though it was short, was like good enough that it definitely made me want to put it on my list. And it was kind of like, it's not really Super Mario Odyssey. It's a little different in terms of like the movement and some of that, but it did kind of give you a sense of what an open world Mario game might look like. And so I remember there being a lot of speculation at the time that maybe this is the future path forward for Mario games. Like, will there be...
I would love that.
Will there be like an open world Mario game? Like, would the next one be open world? And I think that would be awesome. And I like what they did with like allowing you to sort of stash different suits that you could get. Mm-hmm. Like, so say you currently have the fire flower power, and then you get the cat suit. Like, instead of the firepower just going away, it goes into your little inventory. So if you lose the cat suit, you can just like equip the fire one. Or if you like happen upon a situation, like you're going through the puzzle or you're fighting some enemies and you're like, man, I really wish I had the cat suit for this. You can just equip one if you maybe had something else equipped at the time. And that's something I don't think Mario has done before. So...
No,
I definitely hope that they have something like that. Even if like the next game is like Super Mario Odyssey 2, I hope they like implement something like that in Odyssey 2 if they do that. just to like be able to stash different suits that you can use. But I guess it's different for Odyssey since you're throwing Cappy and taking over enemies. But
I mean, but an open world, I mean, if this was kind of like a test, like soft launch of what it would be like to have a completely open world, sort of a one map with different areas style Mario game, I feel like it was a huge success.
Yeah.
And hopefully they saw that and realized like, yeah, it is possible to have this like giant world that you can just go explore different parts of, and it's all one area. And I am very excited for whatever the next mainline Mario is based on this.
Yeah, and there was also some speculation that, well, what if instead of doing like, every 5 to 7 years putting out like a new mainline Mario game, what if they just like every other year were dropping these little more bite-sized things? Like you could get more Mario more often, but they would be shorter releases. And I thought even that would be kind of cool, but I do still want Super Mario Odyssey 2, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, tell me about your number 6.
Okay, my number 6 is not necessarily a full game, but it is in fact a demo, and we made a video about it. It's a game that I revisited a number of times, Cultic. It's the Cultic demo that came out this year. I'm a big fan of those retro shooters. Like Blood, or like Ion Maiden is a recent one that came out that's kind of like inspired by those. But this Cultic demo is something that I would just put on and play through, even though it's like maybe like 30 minutes of gameplay. I just love the aesthetic of it, and I love the way those old games play. And you can like, there's a button to like kick people and whatnot. But I am super pumped for this game to get more content and be released. But I put a surprising number of hours into basically just a demo, like a 30-minute not tech demo, but basically just a level 1 of this game that will come out, who knows when. But I played it enough that I think I probably put more hours into it maybe than my Minecraft. So I was like, yeah, why not put this in? Even though it was only, basically the first level of this thing, and it didn't have like all the weapons and things like that. But the Cultic demo is my number 6.
Yeah, we do have
go ahead and check that video
I was gonna say,
on our channel.
We got that video up on our YouTube channel if you want to see what that game is like, so check that out.
Very fun, and we'll do a video on it when it fully releases, because I'm sure I'll definitely get it and play it.
Yeah.
But what's your number 6?
My number 6 is Persona 5 Strikers. So I really liked Persona 5. I didn't finish it because it's such a long game, but I loved it, and it has left a lasting impression on me. And I very often think about going back to it, or playing through Persona 5 Royal, which is like a longer version with more content in it. But this, to sort of go back to my mindset of being on summer vacation, Persona 5 Strikers is summer vacation, whereas Persona 5 is like the school year for like a group of high school students. Persona 5 Strikers is them going on like a summer road trip and stopping off at different cities in Japan, and one of them is like a beach area. So again, just more of that early part of the year, like February, March mindset of being on summer vacation. But no, I really liked it. It is like the first Muso style game that I've played. So it's not like a turn-based game like Persona 5. It is that action, like combo heavy style of game, like the Warriors games. I'm not super familiar with all of those, but it took me a while to adjust to it. But once I did, I really actually liked that style of combat, and I liked being able to swap to all the different characters and use their different combos, and trying to have the right characters in my party at the right time for the different enemies that I was fighting. And it's a pretty long game, but not nearly as long as Persona 5, so it's like way more achievable if you want to jump in and play it. But it is one of those games where it's hard to recommend just because it's not really setting up or developing the characters, because all of that work was done in Persona 5. It's just sort of carrying them forward. And it does introduce a new character that's also like really unique and cool, and they really developed that character well, and I thought they did a great job with that. But it's really one of those things where, like, if you played Persona 5 and you liked it, this is like one last adventure with those characters before Persona 6 comes out and they move on to a completely new cast of characters. And so it was like really sort of nostalgic a little bit, because it is sort of like a last summer vacation for these characters before they all sort of head their separate ways to go to, you know, like different colleges or whatever. And so that it kind of also took me back to that time in my life when I was like, you know, saying goodbye to friends from school and all of that. So I did get kind of nostalgic towards the end of this game. It was tough. It was harder than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. The soundtrack is great. Like, everybody loves the Persona 5 soundtrack, and the Persona 5 soundtrack is great. I still listen to that fairly often. But Strikers is like where Persona 5 is a little bit more like low-key and sort of jazzy. Like, Persona 5 Strikers soundtrack is a little more upbeat. And so there's some like really great tracks to that soundtrack. I've been listening to it off and on throughout the year, and I still really like it. So I think it is like the free PlayStation Plus game of the month, one of them.
I think you're right, actually.
If you have PlayStation Plus, so I would say just jump in and try it out and see if you like it or not, because it's a lot of fun. I really like it. I like the characters, even though the characters, they probably are like perfect stereotypes of like just certain types of people, but I don't care. I really liked it anyway. I like the characters and I had fun with it. So it's my number 6. What's your number 5?
My number 5 is Death's Door.
Ooh. The
Crow game.
I have still not played this. I'm waiting for my Steam Deck, and I think I will jump in and play that.
I like this game a lot. It's very short, but it is also, there are parts that are pretty difficult. And I wish they would have made, I think I talked about this before on the podcast, but I wish they would have made it easier to acquire the different weapons. The weapons end up being sort of like Easter eggs that you have to like figure out how to get kind of after the fact. So I pretty much just stayed with the main sword the entire time. There was a weapon I didn't even get, but the boss battles are interesting and cool. The music is great. The music is very, very good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even though I've not played the game, I feel like I've listened to the soundtrack to this game a bunch over the year, because especially the main theme is excellent.
Yeah. The levels are super fun. There's a hook shot, which I always love in a game. It's great. I would definitely. There was a speed run of it at AGGQ that I have bookmarked and I'm going to watch eventually. But yeah, this is just a great little game. Like you said, there's a lot of middling games this year that really fill in the like 3 to 7 slot, and it's not something that like blew me away, but it is something I super enjoyed and something I beat, which was rare this year. So definitely check out Death's Door. Maybe we will eventually do a video on it if you end up playing it on your Steam Deck, because I would love to see how it runs on the Steam Deck.
Yeah, it's one of those games that I tried to start it on PC back when it came out, and then like I went on vacation, and so I got sidetracked from it, and then other stuff came out, and so I didn't end up going back to it. And so ever since then, I was like, well, this will be like maybe the first game I play once I get my Steam Deck. Because it does seem like a good game that you would play portably, like if you play it on Switch or something like that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to actually jumping in and giving it a real go, since I didn't the first time around. But I like the art style for sure.
What is your number 5?
My number 5 is Chivalry 2.
Oh, yeah, I remember you were very into this.
Yeah, so I must have played so much of this over the summer. It was just one of those games that's like wacky and slapstick, funny. You start out from battle. For people that don't know, it's like a multiplayer hack and slash, like medieval style combat game, which I've never played before. When I think of multiplayer games online, I think of shooters, and so this was sort of a new, different thing for me. And I got really into it. I played a bunch of it. It was just one of those games that was like fun to sort of unwind with at the end of the night. You just jump in and like I didn't care if I was doing bad. I really didn't. It was just fun to like go in with like a, big long sword or like a, two-handed hammer or axe and just like go in and just like swing away and start hitting enemies, and super satisfying when you would do like one of the heavy overhand attacks and you would actually land it and like take somebody's head off or something. It's hilarious and fun, and I don't know, I had a great time with it. I must have
There's a ton of DLC for it too, right?
Yeah, they've been bringing out new stuff. They've had some events, and I've been sort of following it a little bit off and on throughout the year. And they did have like a Christmas event that I kind of am kicking myself for not jumping into at least a little bit, because I do like skins and stuff, and I do like different holiday events. But yeah, this is a game that I have not played much recently, but I think I wouldn't mind jumping back into it again, but I played a ton of it over the summer. So it was one of those games that if I organized my list based on like time played, this one would probably be fairly high up. So it's my number 5. What is your number 4?
Number 4 we already talked about. It was Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. And I did play a fair amount of the 3D World as well, not just the Bowser's Fury. And that was very, very fun. Also, it's like multiplayer, so you can play with a friend, which is super cool. But yeah, we already discussed it. But yeah, I am excited for the future of wherever Mario is heading based on Bowser's Fury. I hope they take lessons learned from that and expand on it in a crazy way. But I would also be fine with Odyssey 2, whatever that would be.
Yeah.
But that's my number 4. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is Psychonauts 2. So
yes, this PS5 having guy that you are.
Oh, actually, this is on PS4. I played it on PC through Xbox Game Pass though. So
oh yeah, it was on Game Pass. I forgot.
Yeah, so this is one of those weird titles that's like an Xbox Studios game, but it also just happened to come out on PlayStation consoles.
Yeah, during the transition. Kind of.
Yeah, so I subscribed to Xbox Game Pass this last year for the first time, and this was one of the first games I played through Game Pass, and it was great. I mean, I liken it a little bit to Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, because they're both like third-person platforming games that have like unique animated styles, and you're sort of going from area to area trying to collect as many of the collectibles as you can, and they're telling a story in a way that makes you think of like a good animated movie. But Psychonauts 2 is just like so inventive and creative, and like the art style I think took me a little bit to adjust to, but it like gets really colorful at times and really interesting, and just like the areas that they've designed are just like I don't know how they thought to come up with these different things that they made. It's just like, it's so very creative. And I would say Ratchet and Clank might have had the better combat, but like I think Psychonauts 2 was a little bit more off the wall in a way that stuck with me longer. Like I definitely remember thinking about Psychonauts 2 more after I finished it than Ratchet and Clank. But yeah, I've found it really fun, really satisfying, and the music is very good. Very underrated soundtrack. One of the more underrated soundtracks from 2021. So it's my number 4. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is maybe something, I don't know if it'll be on your list, but it's something I played a ton of last year. Loop Hero.
Ah, yeah.
Loop Hero is a nice little indie game. I never got to the final boss of it, but I was just looking up how much time I've put on it. I have 30 hours in it right now.
Oh, man.
Because I would just throw it on. It was a great game. In my previous job, I had this thing I had to do sometimes at night where I basically had to log into these remote servers and update these things that would basically just be like clicking a button, waiting 10 minutes, then clicking another button. And so I would just put Loop Hero on, and I would just play this and like listen to a podcast or listen to some music. and do that task. And it's just like, it's very relaxing, and it's nice to like, it's cool to experiment and to get like interesting builds that get really like powerful, and eventually you're just like going around over and over again and collecting materials and whatnot.
Yeah.
I could never crack that final boss, and I think there's probably something I'm doing wrong.
How many bosses are there?
3, I believe.
Okay, I was going to say, I
might be a
never
secret
made it
one
through the second boss. I kind of hit a wall with it where I seemed...
I think a lot of people did.
Yeah, I couldn't quite get past... I really loved the idea of it. I had a lot of fun with it. I don't know how much time I put into it, but I put a lot of time into it. It's one of those games that I loved, but maybe just because I was never able to finish it, it fell just outside my top 10.
It's still something I'm actively playing. If like if I have to do something on the computer that it doesn't take a lot of my attention, I will throw it on and just play it for a while in the back. It's a kind of a great game to play in the background. It kind of reminds me of Into the Breach a lot, because much like Into the Breach, it kind of respects your time in that you can just leave whenever you want to and come right back to exactly where you were, even if you're in the middle of something.
Oh, really?
So I would just I would be mid-loop and I would just exit, and 2 days later I would come back and be in the same loop and just continue on.
Oh, really? I never tried that.
Yeah, it's great. It's really cool. I like the aesthetic of it a lot.
Yeah, it is a very nice aesthetic, and I like the music too, like the chiptune music.
It's something I almost bought again on Switch, but I decided not to because I think it's a game I think I need to play with a mouse and keyboard.
Yeah.
But
one of the things I really liked,
hope to one day beat it.
One of the things I really liked about it, and this is maybe more, giving credit to Steam, but like I could play it on my desktop, and then I would pull up my laptop, and it also had like a Mac version because I have a MacBook Pro. And so it was a game that when I would go across town and spend time with family, I could just take my laptop, and every now and then I would pull up Loop Hero and continue where I had left off. So that was a fun little thing.
I will hopefully one day complete it, but it is something I'm still actively playing. Every couple of weeks I'll load it up and just play it. But,
it's so unique too. I will say it's one of those things that...
It's such an interesting idea.
Yeah, when you think back on 2021, it's definitely one of the ones that's... stands out because it's something like I've never personally played anything like it, and yet I got super into it when I was playing it. So
what's your number 3?
My number 3, we started this conversation, it's Halo Infinite.
Yes, so tell me all about this campaign.
The campaign, so one of the reasons why I initially had this higher on my list, and to be fair, like given the day, I might have reordered my top 3. I was confident on the top 3 being the top 3. I just wasn't necessarily confident on which one to put where. But the reason Halo Infinite fell a little bit for me was I'm not sure I understood the story. Now, granted, I knew that I was not going to because I had not played Halo 4 and Halo 5. And so the mindset I had going into this was there's going to be elements I'm not going to understand, especially like the stuff with Cortana. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know the lore of Halo. So for me, I thought of it more of like the opening cutscene. Master Chief gets beat up by this big space ape man. I don't know. And he kicks you off the ring, and you get discovered by this UNSC pilot guy. And he takes you down to the ring, and you guys go sort of together. You work through this. You're going around. It's not quite open world, but it does have sort of almost a Far Cry feel to it, where you're like going around, sort of liberating forward operating bases and claiming them. And once you do that, you open up more objectives where you can go like help out some UNSC soldiers who have either been captured or are in the middle of a firefight. And so once you go free them, they actually go back and sort of populate your forward operating bases. And you can go find, like you can actually find cosmetics for the multiplayer in the campaign mode, which I thought was awesome. And so I just had a lot of fun going around clearing all the different objectives, sort of Far Cry style, where it's semi-open world and you're able to just like go around the map, checking off different objectives. and there are like high value targets that you can go take out, and if you take them out, they have like a unique version of one of the weapons in the game that you can sort of add to your inventory, that when you go back to one of the forward operating bases, you can like re-equip, like you can pick which weapons you want to take with you, and so you can choose one of the special weapons that one of those high value targets had. There's just like a lot of really cool ideas to it, and like the grappling hook is so good. It's so much fun to just like go around. It's sort of that Skyrim thing where you're like, there's a mountain, you can go to the top of it, but like you don't know how to get there, so you kind of like do this awkward jump thing where you get all the way to the top. You can do basically that, but you use the grappling hook, and it's like super satisfying to get around the map, to the point where relatively rarely did I use any of the actual vehicles, because if you go to the forward operating base, you can also like summon a vehicle to go around, and I did end up using those to like take out the high value targets, so I didn't have to like get close and actually do the combat with them. But like, yeah, the grappling hook was great. It was one of my favorite features of any game, just like running around that world using the grappling hook. And so like story wise, I didn't think of it as like, oh, I want to know what's going on with this lore and Cortana and all of that stuff and like the conclusion to this. I thought of it more as, this is like a revenge thing where I'm going to take down this one big space ape man who beat me up and threw me out of the ship. I'm going to go to this ring. I'm going to liberate the ring from these, I forget the name of the Banished. I'm going to clear all of those guys out, and I'm going to take down this boss man who was sort of running the show. And when you think of it in that way, it's pretty fun and satisfying to do that. There's just like a bunch of extra elements that I had no idea what was going on with. So yeah, based solely on the campaign and how much fun I had clearing that could have made my top 10. And based on how much fun I had with the multiplayer and how good it is, that alone also could have made my list. So the fact that it comes as sort of a complete package, it's very, very good. And so that's why it's my number 3.
It's crazy that in Steam, the campaign is listed as DLC for Halo.
Yeah, it is. So they had to have them as 2 separate listings since the multiplayer is free and you have to pay for the campaign, but it's one item that you launch from Steam. You know what I mean? Like if you launch the multiplayer, you can play the campaign from there. So it's not like a separate game that you're launching.
It is crazy.
So I guess that is how they would have to do it, but
my number 2, I wonder if it's your number 2. Because we've not talked about it yet.
Okay.
My number 2 is Metroid Dread.
Ooh, we did it. Same one. Metroid Dread is also my number 2.
What a game this was. I am not a guy who likes Metroidvania games, or maybe I am now, but it's not something I ever gravitated towards.
Yeah, me neither. This was sort of a new experience for me as well.
Yeah, it was great. The art style was cool. It's kind of like it is still 2D, but there's kind of a 3D aspect to it when you have certain items. Like I think
they call it
when you do your
2.5D.
Super Ray. Yeah, it's that exactly. It really it is designed so well, because I think we talked about this where we would sometimes we would get to a door that would go to a different area, and we'd be like, well, I wonder if we need to explore more. And the answer to that is always no. Like when the game shows you a door, go through that door, because it's designed so well. It like funnels you into these paths where you feel like you do have freedom, but in fact you are sort of going down. It's holding your hand a little bit.
I'll say at first I found that off-putting a little bit, because I did want to more freely explore, and it is a little bit more linear than you maybe initially realize. But eventually you realize, oh no, this is actually really well designed, and like they've basically, like, the director of this game just like, you know, ushered you along like a specific pathway for a specific reason. And later on in the game, when you have more abilities, that's when you can do some more of the exploring.
And also, like, every boss battle is so well designed where I would go into it and immediately get wrecked because I had no idea what was going on. But I would play it like 3 times, and every time I would get more and more information and be able to progress a little farther. And I never had to look up a guide for a boss. I was always just like, oh, okay, it looks like I need to climb this thing at this time, and then I can get to the next stage. And usually they had like 3 stages. And it was always very, very satisfying to just like bang it out after like 3 or 4 attempts. But it was great.
Yeah.
The sense of progression you get, like, because you're always getting new abilities and things, and I think that is like a staple of Metroidvania games. Is you get these items that you use for combat, but you also progress the story with them and can use them to like get to new areas.
Yeah, and like new movement mechanics as well.
Exactly. It was great. I don't know anything about Samus or Metroid, really. They do kind of a good job of catching you up on it, about like the story so far. But I was interested in the story. I was interested in, what was going on with these bird people and whatnot. It was a game that I did not expect to be on my radar at all, but I really, really, really liked it.
I was not sure I was going to play it, but I was like, it's one of those storied franchises where everybody's talking about it and everybody loves it. And so it was like, I feel like I should play it. Even if I don't necessarily get into it, I should at least give it a shot. And it took me a while to adjust to what the game was doing. And once I made that adjustment and it finally clicked, I got like really into it. I did use a guide to get through it. It was one of those games that I would get lost sometimes and not know
where to
go or what to do. And so maybe that's why it's a little bit not as high as it might have been for other people. But I really enjoyed it. I liked the art style. It made me sort of a Metroidvania fan. Like after having played Metroid Dread, I spoilers. Well, I guess we can talk about it now. I was going to say some of the stuff I've been playing recently have been Metroidvanias, basically because of Metroid Dread. So like I went back and played, like over Christmas, I started Ori and the Will of the Wisps.
And that game, I have that game.
It's so good. Like you should definitely start playing it if you haven't yet. It's very, very good. Like very similarly to Metroid Dread, you basically start out with nothing. Like you can jump once, but like by the end of it, you got double jump, you've got dash, you've got like a grappling ability, and you have all these different attack methods at your disposal. And that's one of the reasons why Metroid Dread was so satisfying, is because you start out with like a pea shooter, and then like by the end of the game you got this massive beam you're like destroying everything with, and just so kind of like you said, the sense of progression in it is just like very, very satisfying. And then it actually did also make me go back and play Super Metroid. Just recently, just within like the last week, I got out my SNES Classic, and I was like, because I finished Guardians of the Galaxy, and I was like, well, I don't have anything new to play, so I should play something. And I kind of jumped around for a bunch of different things, but I was like, I'm going to pull out my Super NES Classic and start Super Metroid. And so I've put like a few hours into it, and it's one of those games that I've started maybe a couple of times, but I would always get lost and not know what to do, and I would just fall off of it. Without having put very much time into it at all. And so this is sort of the first time I've actually really given it a proper chance. And yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it. I think I got stuck at a point because I must have missed the charge beam. And I feel like I'm at a boss where I need the charge beam, so I might have to start it over again. And if I do that, I might just do it on Switch Online, because it is available on Switch Online. But yeah, it's one of those games that you always hear is like a perfect masterpiece that still holds up today. And I've always doubted that a little bit, but having now gone back and actually played some of it, I can say like it is super confusing to like navigate a little bit. And so I have used a guide for it, but like it is just mechanically speaking and even visually speaking, it does actually hold up. And I think I've come around on that. So, yeah, that's what I've been playing, watching. Tell me about your number one.
My number one did not come out this year, but I did get into it this year. My number one is Cyberpunk 2077.
Ooh. Yeah, well, this is one of those interesting ones that came out so late in the year in 2020 that a lot of people did actually push it from consideration for that year, and it's now sort of a 2021 title.
So I played it initially. I got it on Stadia, and I put like 24. My last save when I started it up again was 24 hours in, and it was good. For some reason, I just stopped playing it. I kind of lost interest in it, but in like at the end of, I would say like the end of October or maybe like mid-November this year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try picking up Cyberpunk again. And I got really, really into it. I maxed out 2 of my stats. I maxed out intelligence and technology. So I went like with the hacking route. So I have the ability now to just kill people by looking at them. So I will just like roll up on a situation on my bike from Akira, and I won't even get off of my motorcycle. I will just like look at someone, and I got that contagion quick hack, which just like spreads to other people. And I'll just infect someone, and everyone will die, and then I'll just like casually stroll in and complete the mission. But I have done, I believe, almost every side mission now. I started with 24 hours into the game, and now I'm at 65 hours.
Oh, man.
As of my last save. So I didn't do any of the main story. I've just been going around doing all of the side missions and all of like the little blue icons for like high value targets and like crime activities or whatnot. All the question marks that are like, what will you find here?
Yeah.
So I'm like super maxed out. I have gotten a bunch of iconic weapons, including my main gun is this thing called Comrade's Hammer, I think is what it's called. And it's a gun that only fires 1 bullet, but it explodes people. Like when I shoot someone with it, both of their arms always fly off and they set on fire.
Wow.
And it's a big time power fantasy. And I am just reaching the part where I am running out of side missions and I am starting to do the main missions. But man, it's some of the most fun I've had this year in games. And it's also because it's on Stadia, I have been pretty like frequently swapping between playing it on TV and playing it on computer, which has been really, really nice. And I love the story of it. I love the world of Cyberpunk. Just like looking at all the vistas and all the weird, interesting interactions you have.
Yeah, I must have taken like 100 screenshots while I was playing through Cyberpunk because it is such a like cool looking cityscape.
It's something that I will be excited for. I initially was like, oh, they're making DLC for this, whatever. But now I'm super interested in whatever they're planning on doing for the DLC, even though it got pushed back forever.
Yeah.
I will definitely be diving into whatever new content they have for this. If there's a new area or, you know, new iconic weapons to get, if there are new quick hacks to get, that's great because that's the build I'm going for. But yeah, it's my number one, even though it didn't come out this year. Like you said, it came out late last year, and I picked it up and kind of put it back down. But I really, really engaged with it this year, and that's why it's my number one. What about what's your number one?
My number one is Tales of Arise.
I figured this might be your number one.
Yeah, so Tales of Arise is I mentioned it. I've talked about it briefly on previous podcasts, but like. I like the big, like, long RPGs. Like, that's kind of the type of thing that I'm looking for when I'm looking for a Zack-style game. You know what I mean? Like, so this was sort of... I've likened it a little bit to, like, Final Fantasy VII Remake. It was sort of that title for me this year, where it was, like, a long JRPG that is, like, an action RPG, and it's very story and character-driven. And you're going to these different areas and you're doing combat. And to an extent, that's like both a good and bad thing. Because it is like, I really like the characters and the story. And I was really like absorbed by all of that. And I was having fun with the combat. But it's a double-edged sword because similar to something like Yakuza Like a Dragon, you get to a point, it's a JRPG thing, where you eventually realize you're going to have to stop and do some grinding. And so you're like playing through the story and you're like, man, I really want to get to that next story beat because I'm really interested and invested in where this is going. But you're like, oh, I have to stop and grind for like 10 to 15 hours to actually be able to handle the enemies I'm up against. So like that happened in Yakuza Like a Dragon. And
yeah, it did.
It happened to me in Tales of Arise as well. there just comes a point in any JRPG where you know you're going to have to grind, and so that's kind of a bummer. But like, it's also the type of game that I think I put like 60, 70 hours into, but you could have easily, if you wanted to, put like 100 plus hours into it. Like
Yeah.
there's so much like side content that I didn't even get to. So like just value for money. If you're like the type of person that buys like a couple games a year and you just put a lot of time into it, like you're gonna get a lot from Tales of Arise. But yeah, I had not played a Tales game in the past, so this was sort of a new thing for me as well. And yeah, it really sort of filled that void for me from last year of just like a really big long RPG. It didn't seem like there was a lot of those last year, and so this kind of filled that void, and I really liked it. I liked the art style as well. I played it on PS5, and yeah, I thought it was great. So that's my number one. Were there any like sort of honorable mentions or anything that maybe might have made your list that you didn't get around to playing or finishing?
I did not super. Like I said, I struggled to come up with 10. I know you were had a couple more because you played a bit more games than me, but not really. No, I pretty much just. I mean, Cyberpunk is just so fresh in my mind. It's the thing I've been playing most of, besides like Wordle every day.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't really anything else. What about you? Do you have a top 11, or like what was your?
Yeah, I was
what
gonna
didn't
say,
just make the list?
I guess I could go through the rest of my 25.
Yeah.
If you just want to hear them. So number 11 was Young Souls. This was that Stadia timed exclusive that I played. Number 12 was Wavetale. That was another Stadia timed exclusive that fairly similar to Bowser's Fury in terms of like what you're doing in the game. But 13 was Lost in Random. This was that sort of Tim Burton-esque game. I played it on Switch and really enjoyed it. Number 14 was Loop Hero. I really like that game, but I did sort of fall off of it because I hit a wall and just couldn't make any progress. Number 15 was Nier Replicant. I played through that game fairly early on in the year, and it's weird because it is like an Xbox game, and so you can, you know, from generations ago, so you kind of feel that in terms of some of its design, but also just like really, this is my first Nier game, and just like what a sort of unique like style and vibe with like the music and just the world and everything. Also multiple endings that you have to play through the game multiple times for, like that really threw me off. And so I played it through once, and then I watched some video of people playing the multiple playthroughs just to kind of get a sense of what's going on with the story. And it is very interesting. I think that concept is maybe better in idea than it is in practice. Like I don't want to play through the same stuff over and over again to understand what's going on with the rest of the story. I just want the story to be in the story, you know what I mean? But yeah, I thought it was cool anyway. Number 16 is Deathloop. I didn't finish it. I liked some of what that game was doing. And I did play through basically all the storylines. I just did not put it all together to complete the game. And I did listen to sort of a spoiler cast to like get what's going on with the story. And people are kind of mixed on where that game goes story-wise. And I won't spoil it, but like, yeah, I kind of understand that. But I thought there were definitely some cool concepts to it. I had fun playing it. It just was... I was not as into it as I thought I was going to be. But number 17 is Legend of Keepers. I talked about it multiple times throughout the year. I must have put like a solid like 30 hours into this game over the course of the year. And it's like a dungeon master, dungeon keeper style game where you is sort of a little bit roguelike, where you're defending a dungeon from these heroes and adventurers that are coming in, and so you're using different monsters, and you have these like turn-based battles. And I actually really liked it. It's one of those games I don't think anybody talked about throughout the year, but it came out last year and I played a lot of it and enjoyed it. So Recommend that. Number 18 is Riders Republic, which I played on Stadia. And I'm not super into racing games or anything, but I really enjoyed Riders Republic. I probably put a solid 15, 20 hours into it. And it was one of those games where you do have like a jetpack type of a thing. And so I spent a good amount of time just like flying around like Iron Man in that game just for the sake of it, because it was fun. And there are different like collectibles you can go pick up. And so I would just like pull up my map, mark a spot on it, and just like fly around to the next spot. So I thought that was fun. And of course, like riding and doing the bike races and some of those tricks and everything that you can do, I thought was pretty fun. 19 was Dreamscaper. I think we did a video on this game.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a Hades-like game. If you like Hades, it's a roguelike where you sort of have a hub world that you can go talk to people and learn about different characters in the world, and you have these sort of permanent upgrades that you can get there, and then you go into the dreamscape, and it's very much like Hades, where you're battling these enemies and you're going to different stages and different levels or whatever, and you're fighting different bosses. And then when you inevitably fail, because I always do, you end up back in the real world, and you go around and talk to people, and you can buy some upgrades and stuff like that. And I found that to be very fun and very satisfying. I liked the art style quite a bit. So that's number 19. Number 20 is Ys 9 Monstrum Nox. I'd never played an Ys game before, but this one...
I remember you talking about this.
Yeah, kind of similar to Tales of Arise, honestly, where it's like a JRPG that has like some likable characters and somewhat similar combat style to Tales of Arise. And you're kind of going around this like prison city, and like each new character you add to your party sort of brings like a different movement mechanic, and you can swap back and forth between the different characters if you want like a different combat style while you're doing the combat. And all the different movement styles do make like sort of exploring the city and finding collectibles and all of that very satisfying. It's not the prettiest game you've ever seen. If you watch a trailer for this game, it's not going to blow you away with its visuals. But the Ys series is one of those like long running JRPG series that is like beloved in Japan and has like a niche audience here in the West, but it's starting to maybe get a little bit more attention here. So I played a lot of that. I didn't finish it. I might still go back and finish it because I was enjoying it, but it's not nearly on the level of Tales of Arise for me. But number 21 is Grifflands. This is that, how do you describe it? It's what is that one game? I always forget the name of it. Slay the Spire. Why can I not think of that?
Ah, yes.
Yeah, Grifflands is a Slay the Spire like, basically, is how you would describe it. It's like a deck builder roguelike style of game. And I like, there are different characters that you can unlock and that you can play through like a story with. And the unique thing that I liked about it was that you sort of have two different decks that you're building up. And like one of them is sort of for combat and the other is for like conversation or like negotiation, that type of thing. And so I thought it was really interesting how they sort of gamified conversation, almost made it sort of a combat like of an experience where you're using different negotiation tactics as opposed to using different attacks, you know what I mean? And the art style is really cool. I don't know how to describe that. It's kind of like hand drawn, but it almost looks sort of vaguely Star Wars like. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty cool game. Number 22 is Overboard. I think I put up a short video about this on our channel. But it is a sort of a point and click adventure a little bit. It's like it's set in, I want to say the 30s, and you're from England and you're taking a cruise to America. And while you're on the cruise, this woman pushes her husband off the boat and he dies, and you play as the woman, and it's a little bit like Clue, where you're trying to, everybody else is aware that the murder happened, and so you're talking to each of them, and you're basically trying to figure out how you can avoid being caught, or better yet, you're trying to figure out how to incriminate someone else for the murder, which I thought was a really unique idea. And basically, in game time, you have like 8 hours before you make it to America. And so the goal is to avoid being caught or to incriminate somebody else within that amount of time. But like every time you go to a new area of the ship, that like advances time. And so you can get through like a playthrough of like the cruise in like a pretty short amount of time. It doesn't take long at all. But you may fail or you may succeed, but there's like so many different paths that you can take from like different areas of the ship, and from talking to different people, or like having choosing different dialogue options as you go. And so there's like, I feel like 100 different possible ways that the thing can play out, and I've only seen like a few of them.
Interesting.
And so for such a small game, like you get a lot out of it, and it's like really fun, really interesting, really well written. I highly recommend Overboard. It is on Switch if you've not played it. But number 23 is Cruisin' Blast.
Yeah, you were really into that.
Yeah, I played a ton of Cruisin' World on the N64 when I was a kid growing up. And so to have a new cruising game in 2021 was sort of mind-blowing. And so I played a bunch of it. It was just one of those games that was like fun to jump into every now and then and just like do a race that they're super quick. Like it's all downhill. It takes like a minute or two to complete a race. And so you could like pick up your Switch, play through a race, and then put it back down again and go about your business. And so it was fun. It was sort of a blast from the past, and I really enjoyed it. Number 24 is New World. This is that Amazon.
Oh yeah, I forgot that came out.
Yeah, it was that Amazon MMO. It sort of had a huge moment on the internet when it came out there for a while. And I played a bunch of it. I feel like I will eventually jump back into this. It's one of those things where like I get super into Destiny 2 for a while, and or maybe I'll get into like ESO for a little while, and then I'll fall off of it, and then like a few months later I'll pick it back up again. I feel like New World is going to be one of those games for me where I'll get super into it for a little while, and then I'll fall off of it, and then I'll jump back into it. But I liked the combat. It felt more, for an MMO, it felt more like a standard third-person action game, which I think is not what a lot of MMO people are maybe looking for, but it was something that was interesting for me. And it's also one of those games where, kind of like Skyrim, where everything you do sort of builds up some sort of like bar of efficiency or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so it's just satisfying to even go around and like chop down trees and like build up your, different abilities. And then you can use all of that for crafting as well. So I liked it, and I thought it was sort of unique that instead of like a normal fantasy setting, it was sort of like a different era. It was sort of like the Spanish conquistadors era of like the world, which is something that I feel like you don't see a lot in games. But and number 25, the last one on my list, is Genesis Noir. I don't know if we talked about this.
I don't remember this, no.
So it's one of those games that you have to look up a trailer for. The art style for it is, it's basically grayscale, basically black and white. I mean, there are definitely moments where you have like really vibrant colors as well, but it's sort of set back in the old timey days of like film noir from like the 30s and 40s.
Oh, this is very interesting looking.
Yeah, and it's one of those games that stuck with me like throughout the year. I would often think back on it basically for its art style. It is not the game I had the most fun playing. I don't know that like you're doing different things, so it's not like it runs into a rut of where you're doing the same things over and over again. It's just like you're doing these different little puzzles, and it's not like mind-blowing what it has you doing, but like the story and the art style and just sort of where the game goes is actually fairly mind-blowing. And so I don't necessarily want to spoil it, but if I recall correctly, because it's been such a long time since I played it, you're this guy whose girlfriend was murdered by, I think she was also with somebody else in this band that maybe you're in. And so you go to the area where, like, the crime scene of where she was murdered, and there's basically the guy that shot her, like, when he pulled the trigger, like, the bullet comes out, it like rips like a hole in the time and space and the universe, and you're able to like somehow go into that and like go to different places and different times and different places in the universe, and exploring those gives you like different information, and it's like really interesting. I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, and I'm probably mixing it up because, again, it's been a long time since I played it, but
the gameplay looks really, really cool.
Yeah, it's one of those games that's like super, super unique and like deserves more attention than it got. But yeah, that's my number 25.
Wow. Quite the list.
It is quite the list. And there are more games that I didn't play that could have made my list. And there are other games that I played that didn't quite fall within the top 25. But yeah, these are the ones that I wanted to mention. Was there anything that you played that was not from 2021 that you liked? I guess Cyberpunk.
You know what I have been playing recently is I picked up Luigi's Mansion 3 when it was on sale, and that has been really, really fun to play through.
Yeah, that was one of my top games the year that came out. I loved Luigi's Mansion 3.
It's so good. It's so, like, the production value is so high, and every, like, floor you get to is so interesting and unique, and the gameplay is really fun as well.
Yeah, it's definitely like one of the more underrated Nintendo Switch games. Like, I feel like it's probably in my top 5 of Nintendo exclusive Switch games, so definitely like that game. I guess we played Splitgate a little bit, although I guess that's not.
Yeah, I debated putting that on my list, but I realized we really only played it like 2 or 3 times, and I think all it really did was whet our appetite for Halo.
Yeah, that's fair. Just looking at the other stuff that I have on my list. Anything worth mentioning? I guess I didn't put enough time into Returnal to give it a mention on my list, and I kind of feel the same about Grime, which is a game that I think is great and that everybody should play, especially if you liked Metroid Dread and you're looking for another Metroidvania. I would say check out Grime for sure, but otherwise, anything else you've been playing or watching?
I watched The Eternals came out on Disney Plus this week.
How was it?
So, did you watch it?
I did not, no.
It was fine. That's
the general sentiment that I think I've heard about that movie.
I will say, though, that the last 5 seconds of it blew my mind.
How so?
Because, well, there was like the last, like, the 2 post-credit scenes sort of set up these other things, I guess, that are going to be happening down the line. And the final post-credit scene after the credits, something happens in like the last 5 seconds that I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I looked up what it was supposed to mean, and I could not believe what it meant. And so I was pretty excited for that. But otherwise, it was just a fairly regular... The CGI sometimes was not super great. And I'm not super invested in any of these characters, but I mean, whatever. It was a decent movie. It was maybe a little bit too long.
Yeah, the other sentiment I've heard about that is that like the Hawkeye show should have been a movie, and that movie, The Eternals, should have been the TV show. But
now that's interesting. I think I actually would agree with that because the Hawkeye show takes place over the span of like 2 or 3 days. And I think that actually would have been a really good movie.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been out on Marvel stuff ever since the last, what was it, Endgame?
I have also been watching The Book of Boba Fett.
How was that?
I like it a lot, actually. It's been really good.
I would watch that. I just have not subbed to Disney Plus, and I don't know if I want to, but I would watch it if I were. Maybe we should save. I was going to say, maybe next week we talk about upcoming games, the things we're looking forward to next year.
Yeah, the year to look forward to.
Yeah. So look forward to that podcast. I don't know if you have any parting wisdom for this week.
My parting wisdom is that it's very easy to make your own hummus.
Really?
And it tastes a lot better than the store-bought hummus, and you can actually make a lot more of it much more cost-effectively by just getting the dry beans, soaking it, and then adding your own sauce and whatnot. But if you're always buying that like Sabre or whatever hummus, you should look into just like Google how to make hummus, and there's like a bunch of just like 2 or 3 minute videos where they tell you how to do it, and it's really, really good.
Interesting. Never thought of that before.
It's great. It's really good. It's a good little snack.
Oh, I guess I can mention one more game. Not that we've talked too long already, but I did start playing a game called Beyond a Steel Sky. Have you heard of this game?
No, but I will guess that it is about space.
Sort of, not really.
No, okay.
It's a sort of a sequel to like a 90s era point and click adventure game called Beneath a Steel Sky.
Oh.
And it's on Switch. I want to say it's also on PlayStation, and probably PC as well. But I did not play the original, but I jumped into this one, and it sort of makes it more like third person. And you're going around and you're talking to different people, and you're like you're basically solving these little puzzles that are like, I need to talk to this person and they want this thing, and I have to go talk to somebody else and figure out how to get this other thing. And you eventually get this like hacking tool that you can use, and so you're trying to
now you speak my language.
You're trying to figure out how to hack this thing over here to be able to do this other thing that will make this other person do this thing. And so it's there's not really any combat to it. It's all just like solving these little puzzles and like to advance from story beat to story beat. And I like the aesthetic. I'm liking the gameplay of it. It's something that I don't think I've really played anything quite like it before. But I've also not really heard anybody else talk about it, but I think it's good and that you should definitely check it out. It might even be the type of game that's up your alley.
Yeah, it's not even on my radar, but I'm looking at some gameplay of it. I like the aesthetic of it. It kind of reminds me of that Outer Worlds style.
Yeah, that was my initial thought as well when I saw the trailer for it. But I feel like this would even be something that like you could play with your girlfriend if you guys could just like work through like some of the puzzles and like try to figure out how to get from place to place, that kind of thing.
I'm always on the hunt for games like that.
Yeah, so I definitely check that one out. But that's the last thing I've got for this week. So follow us on Twitter. Go check out our YouTube channel. If you search for Starside Cafe, that you'll find us there. Leave us a review, a rating on iTunes or Spotify. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one.
See you in 2022. Or it's already 22. I'll see you later. I'll see you next week.
Exactly. Goodbye.
Bye.